Hi, my North Park students. Today I'm going to be introducing you to project number 1, which is going to be making Collagraph robots. Now that word collagraph might not sound familiar to you, so what is a collagraph? A collagraph is a basic method of printmaking using a flat surface of collage materials that are glued on to another form of surface with a variety of textures. You might be thinking, well, what is a relief surface or sculpture? Well, I'm glad that you asked me. A relief is a sculptural technique where the sculpted materials remain attached to the flat background. You can either add to a flat surface, which is called additive relief, or you can take away or carve away a design, and that's called subtractive relief sculpture. We're going to be creating a robot collagraph using geometric cardboard shapes, and we are going to be adding the cardboard on top of another cardboard flat surface. So we are doing an additive technique. We're not using thick cardboard like you might find from an Amazon box, but we're going to be using cardboard from cereal boxes or snack boxes, that really thin cardboard that you can easily cut with scissors. The materials that we're going to be using to create our collagraphs are that cardboard I was just talking about, scissors, glue, white paper, crayon, but make sure to take the wrapper off the crayon, washable markers, kind of like Crayola markers, those are perfect, water, and a paintbrush. The marker, water, and paintbrush, those are going to be optional. It does create a really cool effect, but you definitely don't need it. The collagraph print is going to be pretty amazing on its own. Okay, so let's get to the directions. Okay everyone, so here are the directions on how to create a robot collagraph. I made the sculpture ahead of time because, like I said in the directions, it definitely has to dry first. But I'm going to show you kind of how to get to this, and then you guys can go ahead and get started. So what you're going to need to begin is some either cereal box or a snack box or something that you might have at home or have saved. And what you're going to do is you're going to open it up. So for example, okay, you can either just rip it, but you see how it opens up here and it has many different tabs. So whichever cereal box you have, I'll use this small one to start so it fits in the screen. You're going to take your scissors and you are going to begin cutting off of these tabs. Now remember, when you're using your scissors, especially for my little ones, it might be easier to cut smaller first, and you're always cutting away from your body. You never want to turn your wrist like this. One, because how uncomfortable is that? And two, it's just not safe. So you want to hold your hand next to where your scissors are, and you're going to cut away from your body. And then you rotate the paper and you can continue cutting. So I'm going to go ahead and continue cutting the tabs. So what you're left with then are these two larger pieces of cardboard. So depending on what size box you have, the middle piece is going to be larger. It doesn't really matter the size, but this is going to be the surface that you're going to be adding the glue onto. So I already have one set aside. I did it the same size as this so you can see it side by side. So these are the ones that I'm going to use. The first thing you're going to start to do is think about, with all this leftover stuff, well, what shapes can you make with this? And you're thinking geometric shapes like semicircles, circles, rectangles, squares, maybe even some diamonds, things along those lines, and you're going to begin to cut. Now, if you are a pretty confident cutter, you can just go ahead and start snipping away. But if you need a little bit of help, what you can do is you can take a pencil or a marker and you can go ahead and maybe even on the back or on the front, it really doesn't matter, you can draw the shape that you might want. So if you want a triangle, but you need the lines there, go ahead and draw them in. And then you can start cutting. Notice I keep rotating. All these pieces can go to the side. So I'm going to go ahead, maybe over here, I'm going to cut out a circle. Notice what happens. My scissors stay straight and I rotate the paper. And I don't really mind that it's not a perfect circle. But if you really want something that is the same, I would take something from your house, like maybe a cap to a marker, and you can trace it, and then you can cut it out if you really want it to be a perfect circle. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut my shapes. This is a good opportunity for you to cut them too. And then so now what I did is I organized all my pieces around my my cardboard plate. Let's call it a plate that we're going to work on. And now you want to think, how are you going to create a composition on here? So what I'm thinking, and composition is just another word for how you're organizing everything. So I think I'm going to start with my bigger pieces. And if you think of a robot, they still have, you know, a head, a body, maybe arms, legs, maybe hands, but I want to see how creative you can get. So I'm going to go ahead and start organizing. Okay, so I think this might be about where I stop creating my robot. You can add as many details as you would like. Okay, so now we're going to be gluing all the little pieces on. What I found to be easiest is if I start with the smaller pieces and glue those on first, and then I lift up the big pieces. That way I don't lose my composition. If you wanted to, you can take a picture of this and then kind of take everything off and then start gluing that way. That's completely up to you. But I just kind of like working this way. I find it a little easier for me anyway. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let this dry, but I think that to make sure it really stays dried, I'm going to take a book, I'm going to place it on top, and that way it stays down, it stays flat, and that all those little pieces are not moving. This is a good time for you to go do something else. Maybe come back to this project tomorrow, another day, because remember, you don't have to finish everything in one day. I'm giving you a week or two to get your projects done. So there really is no rush. But either way, I'm going to show you what to do for the next step. Okay? Okay, my most amazing artists. So now what we're going to do is our actual printmaking. So you have now your dried cardboard, and the reason why I need it to be dried, because we are going to be taking our piece of paper and we're going to be putting it on top, and if all of those pieces were not glued down, our next step would definitely start moving everything. Okay, so you're going to take a crayon. I would start with just one color. After I show you how to do this, you might get more experimental with how you're going to be doing your printmaking, but for now, I think I'm going to just start with green. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this somewhat in the middle. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, you're going to hold it down with one hand so the paper and cardboard doesn't move. If you feel a little bit more comfortable, go ahead and tape your cardboard down and then tape your paper on top on your table, so that way you're not worried about your printmaking moving. You're going to hold it down flat, you're going to put your fingers in the middle, and you're going to start pushing. And what you're going to see is your robot start to show up underneath this rubbing. How cool is that? This everywhere. All right, so that's the first part, and you could be done here if you want. I'm going to take this out because I'm going to save this for later. And then this next part, this is the optional that I was talking about with your washable marker. I just use Crayola washable marker. I also have these Crayola markers that are the fine tip. Whatever kind of washable marker and whatever brand you have is fine, as long as it's not permanent. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to outline my robot. My next step, you can either leave it like this, or if you would like, you dip your paintbrush into your clean water. I start putting my water on the empty space, and then I make sure to touch. I love this process. Now you guys know I love this process so much because we do this in class sometimes. I love taking something like marker and making it into watercolor, especially because sometimes when we're first learning how to use watercolor, it seems like, oh my gosh, everything's out of control. It starts to look a little muddy. Where this process is a nice introduction to use watercolor, because wherever the water goes, that is where the color goes. So you can see as I'm working around the surface, it's starting to take the color. I'm always touching that marker, and then I pull the color into the empty space in the background. All right, so now you guys have your very own robot print. I think this is one of the coolest things ever. I love printmaking like this. I love using simple materials and things that you already have at home to create these really awesome pieces. Now you can choose, hey, you have a whole nother, you still have a sculpture that you can print again. Maybe try different color combinations. Maybe you make a series of them, printmaking 1, 2, 3, 4. I would love to see what you create. All right, have fun everyone.